Hey everyone, and welcome to Chef AJ Live. This is now day 3 of Food Addiction Recovery Week, where we have fabulous guests for you several times a day. Not only do we have clinicians and doctors who are on the front lines treating this disease, which I believe is a disease of food addiction, but we have people on the show that suffer from the disease in varying degrees. Some have feels like they have escaped the pleasure trap, at least for now. Others have been battling with this for a really long time. And Chef Sroufe, he is an incredible human being. He's not only a New York Times best-selling author and one of the most talented plant-based chefs, but he's somebody that has struggled for a long time. And he's been very open about his struggles. And I think the hope is that you can learn from him about what it really takes to get this burden, this beast off your back. So please welcome Del to the show.
Hi, Chef AJ. Good to see you.
It's good to see you because it's been a while, and I know you have been in some dark places in your life, and you're coming out.
I am coming out. You mentioned it. I've had a story that goes back to being 8 years old and on my first diets. And I'm going to tell you something. If I could go back all those 4 years now, I certainly would have a different conversation with my doctor, right? But we didn't know back then, right? Back then, calorie restriction was the norm of the diet. And I was put on my first calorie restricted diet at the age of 800 calories a day, 8 years old. And ask an 8-year-old now, ask any 8-year-old, honey, you need to go and eat 800 calories a day. Can you go figure that out? Because there was no take-home document, no prescribed diet, no menu eating plan, or none of that. We just went home and did it. And what happens when you're hungry? Your guests talk about this all the time. It's exactly what happened to me. Is I became the secretive eater, right? So mom would give me 30 cents to take for lunch at school, and I'd head to the penny candy store and get 30 pieces of penny candy and eat that all before I got back home. So that was what set up for me what was a lifetime of yo-yo dieting, a 53-year career of working at weight loss every day of my life. And of course, what you see happening is with every diet, you stop and you start again, and you stop and you start again, and you slowly gain more weight and more weight and more weight and more weight. And then even after going vegan back in 1997, I gained 200 pounds. 200 pounds on a vegan diet, topping out close to 500 pounds, and not really sure what was going on. And it wasn't until I actually adopted a whole food plant-based diet that I started to lose that weight and move forward with my life. But it wasn't the end of the show, because I think there's this bigger picture of weight loss and of weight management and of health that has to happen. And it's not just about the food choices that you make every day, but everything else in your life, the stress, the sleep, the exercise. I heard Dr. Walsh talk about it in your interview with him, the exercise, the social interaction, your social environment, setting up your house for success. And all of that I had to learn to finally get to the place where, after gaining 200 pounds again 5-6 years ago, I was able to stop and take a look at what I was doing. I stopped working. For the first time in my entire life, I quit the 100-hour work week and went home and sat for a few years and came out of that saying, I've got to change the way that I live my life. And that's what I've been doing for the past year. I'm happy to report I've lost 100 pounds of the weight that I've gained, and I'm well on my way to losing the rest and feeling better than I have for a long time, because I'm doing it the right way with a low calorie density diet and the right foods, and staying away from some of the poisons that call my name from time to time.
Adele, I think, I was mentioning this to Dr. Lyle on the last show that we did a few hours ago, that, my mother was morbidly obese, and I have one brother that was, and they both unfortunately died very young from lifestyle related diseases. But of course, I'm sure they were probably eating in secret, but I don't think it was that they were eating necessarily huge volumes of food, but the food that they were eating was so high in calorie density. And I remember you doing an interview where you were saying that, you made this, like, you're a great chef. So if you have a bakery, I mean, just one treat, that doesn't take up so much room in your stomach, could be more calories or fat than you would normally have in a meal.
Well, I had the best of both worlds, where I could eat the calorie dense foods and copious amounts of it. So binge eating for me, which is what I've struggled with a lot, is not just about the one scone that I would have in the bakery, but the 3 or 4. Or it wasn't about just the 1 ounce bag of potato chips, but the 1 pound bag. I mean, so I started tracking calories in the past year, and I had one, and I track it even when I'm binging. I tracked my calories, and I did have one binge, and I had 6,000 calories in a day easily, right? Easily had 6,000 calories, and so it's easier to do it if you're a binge eater. It's just compounded that much, and think about how if you can eat an extra 3,000 calories a day, that's a pound a day, right? You can gain 100 pounds to 100 pounds easily in a year. It's easy to do.
Do you think that there's something about that food, at least for you, that makes it just impossible to stop eating once you start?
Yeah, I know. Well, I think we with the term that you hear is hyperpalatability, and whatever that brain chemical reaction that it is that gets you going keeps going, right? And it's sort of like any other addiction. And I've wandered back and forth with that word addiction. I don't love the word addiction, but let's just assume that it's a real thing, right? It's the same kind of a principle that you eat something that tastes good and you want more of it. And if you have my kind of personality, and if you come from a background of restrictive eating where you're eating 800, 700, 1,000 calories in a day, and then all of a sudden your potato chip passes the lips, you're in trouble. All right, you're in big trouble. I've been there so many times, it's ridiculous. And even to this day, even after losing 100 pounds, I still am at this place where, for me, especially sugar is probably my bigger issue than anything else. For me, one cookie is down a dangerous path.
Yeah. And people that don't have that problem, they don't understand it. And even though I'm slender now, I heard about this from Dr. Jean Jack Wang, who is doing studies on this, saying that there's a thing called post-obese brain. And I know that that's how it would be for me today. That's why I don't take that food, because I know what it's like. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole.
I made that assumption, last September, when I got so focused and I was eating AJ, the cleanest I've ever eaten, right? I was eating the low calorie density foods. There was no oil, no sugar passing these lips. And 5 months later, I'm 60, 70 pounds down. And I thought, well, okay, I can have a treat today. So you can't, because what's happening is both sides of those things, the neuroplasticity of a fat person and the thin person are living next door to each other. They're both there fighting for attention, right? And so I did great for those 5 months when I was not doing any of that. But then the one moment that I stepped off that ledge, down I went. And
Yeah.
it took me months to get back on track. I probably would be down 130 pounds now if I hadn't had that little bit of setback. But it's a real thing. And I talk about it because sometimes you just cannot have the cookie. You cannot have the treat. You can't step off that ledge and have a day off. There is no day off if you're like me, and that those hyper palatable foods call your name from the other room.
Absolutely. There's a saying in, I believe it's AA, that when you're getting sober, your addiction is in the corner doing push-ups. And I think with food, it's the same thing.
The only, the bigger struggle for me is, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't have chosen a career as a chef. Maybe going into the food business wasn't the right idea, right? Because it puts me in the center of the beast. Even in the whole food plant-based kitchen, I'm recipe researching all day long. I spend a lot of my time, like we're getting ready for our first annual first retreat that CNS has done for a long time in Arizona in November. And I've got to plan menus and classes and events for that. So getting ready for all of that means that I'm looking at recipes and looking at food all day long.
Right. I don't know if it means you shouldn't be a chef, but I think owning a bakery, if you think you have food addictions, isn't the best idea. It's like kind of having the fox guard the hen house, if you will.
Yeah, but how long was it? 25 years ago, I wasn't thinking about food addiction. I was thinking that, I just needed to lose weight. When the focus is purely on weight loss, it's a different conversation. So it's not until, and to be honest, it wasn't even today, as I get ready to talk to you, I was talking to myself about, and talking to, I have a weight loss coach that I work with about, am I a food addict? Is that really what I need to be doing? And regardless of what you want to call it, I have an issue with eating these hyper palatable foods, and I need to address that, right? And it means I probably need to not have them in the house, which I don't. And I need to not have the app on my phone, which allows me to have vegan desserts delivered to my door, so I don't, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I think I'm one of the first people that brought this idea of food addiction to the vegan world, because nobody in the plant-based space was really talking about it, with the possible exception of maybe Dr. Goldhammer and then a little bit Dr. Scott Stoll and Dr. Neil Barnard. But when I was still obese, like 10 or 11 years ago, and I found out that like food addiction was a thing, I was actually excited, because it felt like, well, now there's nothing wrong with me and my brain. It's the problem is the food. And I remember seeking treatment. And the person who is one of the experts in this field, who's unfortunately not plant-based, basically said, you can't be a pastry chef if you want to recover. And I'm like, oh, really? But that's my job. As luck would have it, the universe intervened. The restaurant was sold and it was closed. But I could see her point. Like, how I couldn't continue to make German chocolate cakes and peanut butter chocolate cheesecakes if I wanted to be slender and not eat those things. I don't think it would be possible.
I know when I closed my bakery, it was probably the one out of necessity, but I'm pretty sure I might have saved my life, because it was true. I couldn't go into that bakery every day and not eat any of those, and pastries, the recipes. I have a cookbook. I had this discussion recently. I have a cookbook full of recipes for my bakery waiting to be published. And I've had to say, no, I'm not going to do it, because I can't go back in there and test those recipes. I can't put my mind back into that space for a minute, or I can't do it.
Good for you. But if you really want it out, you get somebody to do it. There are people that would be able to do that for you.
Well, that's a different conversation, but
right. But good for you. I agree with you. That's why, it's I want to just read you a nice comment from a live viewer named Rita. Love you, Chef Del. I met you a few years ago at the Columbus Veg Fest and had you sign my cookbook. I love hearing your story as I struggle daily. So inspiring. And, you just haven't struggled daily. I mean, 8 years old. Did your mother notice you were overweight? Did she bring, how did that start? Were other members of your family overweight? And what were you guys eating? Were you eating processed food, standard American diet?
Well, and that's kind of a great question, because we didn't, in my house, there wasn't chips and snack foods and fast food, and we didn't go out to eat fast food. My mother cooked every day. We ate at home every day, but my mother was a really good cook. And I remember I gained weight after my parents got divorced, and so it was a year after they got divorced that I ended up in a doctor's office. So I think part of it might have been that the emotional trauma of that, and learning to use food as a support mechanism, as the only pleasure you find, right? But I also remember, I come from my father's family as farmers. In Southern Ohio, my grandmother's one of the best cooks that ever existed on the planet, right? And we would go there. So he think of me on this diet, and then going down to my grandmother's farm where she had 9 kids and 9 grandkids, and she put out a feast at every meal, right? And we're talking roast beef and ham and chicken and macaroni and cheese and everything cooked with bacon fat and all of that. And that being this feast that shows up and says, here, eat all you want, right? And so I did. It started that starvation and then binging, where at home, mom was cooking with a whole wheat bread, and we were taking the skins off of chicken, and I was eating more salads and things like that. And then I'd go to dad's on the weekends or go to grandma's, and then there'd be this other world. So it wasn't a fast food diet for me, and that came later, right before I ever became vegan.
Yeah. And then, what we heard, like you mentioned, Dr. Walsh, who was on yesterday, talking about how not only does it begin in childhood, it begins before childhood, before being in the uterus, but with what your mom ate, what your grandmother ate.
Yeah. And we had the typical American diet. And like I said, it might have been a whole home cooked, but it was rich and fatty and sugar. And my mom was an excellent baker on top of everything, and my grandmother's too. And so all of that was there. And my mom was there wasn't a lot of overweight people in a family. And no one in my family, I had one cousin, my cousin Danny is the only person I knew in my family. He was younger than I am, who was actually 400 and some pounds before he was in his 30s and died of an aneurysm. But in his house, there was copious. I remember going into the house once, there was candy everywhere, and potato chips and Fritos and all of that food everywhere. And looking at relatives on that side of the family, my mother's family, my Aunt Jackie was only 12 years older than I am. We'd go out to eat, and it was lobster mac and cheese, and it was all those kinds of food. And she died before she reached 70. Matter of fact, most of her sisters did too. And a lot of it had to do with that kind of food.
Wow. Has your excess weight caused any health problems for you over the years?
I've been very lucky. I've had high blood pressure. In fact, I went on medication for the first time last year, on 2 medications, and I'm already off of one of them, and had the second one cut down to every other day because my blood pressure has been going down as I've been losing weight. But I've been very lucky. No diabetes, and I say that because my younger brother has had cancer, and he had a weight problem too, by the way. My younger brother and I were put on the diet the same day, right? And so we've had the same, we're like twins in terms of food. But he's had cancer, and he's got what's it called, heart palpitations now, and he's on medication for that. My dad has diabetes, and lots of my family members have diabetes, and I was lucky. And I think eating the vegan diet, even an unhealthy vegan diet, may have saved me, right? Because I did not eat the animal foods that the rest of my family eats. So I might have been lucky there.
Do the other members of your family, do they struggle with this issue as well, the pleasure trap?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, they all do. Yeah, all of those that are still alive. My younger brother's about the same size I am now, and struggling with weight and trying to lose weight. And my older brother actually has lost weight recently, and because he's got diabetes, and he was never fat. He was the skinny guy in the family until he got older, and then his weight ballooned later in life.
Yeah. Linda says, I adore Chef Del. He's helping so many right now. Were there like emotional consequences to being larger? I always feel like, and this is probably totally wrong, but I feel like it's easier for a guy to be heavier because, like, you know, it's more accepted. It's like you can be a football player, you know, but but was it hard?
Yeah, I think there's a myth about guys not having the emotional trauma with weight loss. One, I was teased for it because in 1967 and the 1970s, we 2/3 of us weren't overweight. It was a smaller number, so you stood out more. You know, it's scary that it's more normalized now, right? That you walk out the door and everyone looks like you. That's not a good thing, but you know, at least you're not standing out in the crowd. Back then, you know, in my high school, I was one of the few overweight people, and we're just talking about, you know, I was 40 pounds overweight back then, 50 pounds overweight. But I was teased at home. My older brother teased me every day. I was called fatso and all that. So yeah, there's a lot of emotional trauma that goes into that. And if you don't, the most important part of this conversation is if you don't deal with that, if you don't deal with the emotional trauma, then you're doomed to repeat everything that's happened to you because you're always falling back into that. You're always in that victim mode.
Yeah, and I'm not so sure that helps people recover when they're when they're shamed and criticized, whether
No.
a well-meaning doctor or a family member. I mean, it's got to be so hard for a little kid, you know?
Well, yeah, I think kids have it the worst when you especially if you are shamed by your family or by those that supposedly love you, right? It's a whole different thing. Then you just assume that the world is the way that it is.
I just can't even imagine a doctor or anyone telling an 8-year-old to eat 800 calories. You barely even know math then.
Yeah, and I don't even think to tell my mother that. I'm not even sure that. I mean, you know, I don't even know if in 1960, was that 1969, that the nutrition labels had the same requirements that they do now, that all of your food had it. And for my mom, who was cooking every day, you know, she wasn't a, so she did some simple things. Again, we were eating whole wheat bread when nobody else was, and we did eat salads, and we did eat the skinless chicken and all of that. But and I do remember, oh my God, do you remember the cabbage soup diet?
Oh, absolutely.
And my mom had the cabbage soup thing going on in the house too, because you know she had a weight problem, but she never had the weight problem I did. But yeah, we had that cabbage soup thing going on.
Wow. Well, Susan says, I love Chef Del's vegan cheese sauce. It's the best I ever had. And Cheryl is saying, food addiction is no different from any drug addiction. Such a long, hard road. Bravo, Chef, for your awareness and success. Keep going. Great respect for you. So people want you to succeed, just so you know that. I mean, I think you know
they do. And, you know, part of when I started this community, I started at Nutrition Studies at the T. Colin Campbell Center. The CNS kitchen that we started was for a support group for people like me. To be really honest, I I feel sometimes that even in the whole food plant-based world, you're judged pretty harshly for being overweight. You eat a whole food plant-based diet, there's no way. I can remember the first time I was in Marshall, Texas, and somebody walking up to me and going, well, there's no way you eat this diet. And regardless of anything, and that kind of commentary doesn't do me any didn't do me any good, and can't do anyone else any good. So this community that we created and is all about people in a non-judgmental environment. You show up where you are imperfectly, and that's part of the reason I don't look forward to having this conversation in public every day. But part of the reason that I do it is because we've got to get it out in the open. We've got to talk about it, and we've got to have support for each other, because otherwise you never get past that, and then society never changes its way. And for some people in my group, by the way, they go home to a family that doesn't support them. They live in a house where they're the only one that eats like this. And so they come to our weekly check-ins every Thursday night, and we're the only support they get in this kind of an environment. So it's kind of I'm really glad that we did it. And it's helped me a lot too, because as much as I give support, I get support, and it's been a pretty awesome thing.
I agree. That's why I stay teaching these classes. Kind of keeps you accountable, right?
Yeah, the accountability is a big part of it, and being vulnerable enough. I know recently I had a night where I don't let myself eat after 6 o'clock at night, and I had a night where I wanted something, and I called my work partner, and I had a conversation, and I didn't used to do that. The secretive eater in me was the guy that would eat it and then hide from it, right? But I decided, well, I need to be open about this, about my cravings. And it was funny because she's like, man, I was just getting ready to call you. I had the same thing going on where I was just craving something, I just wanted something. And we sat and talked for 30 minutes, and then the craving passed.
Yeah, that's the thing. Distraction is a really wonderful tool.
So we're learning strategies like that make a difference. And that's what I love about C&S Kitchens. We're going to talk about that a lot more at our wellness retreat in November in Arizona, all about the support, about the other aspects of health that matter. It's not just about the food you eat, but it's all of it, that stress, that exercise, that hydration, all of it. So we're excited about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love for you to talk more about that. But first, I'd like to read this comment from Olivia, who's watching live. Wow, this talk is so inspiring. Thank you, Chef Del, for your vulnerability. And Meg wants to know, how did you deal with the emotional trauma to get over being shamed?
Well, I think I've had my share of therapy, to be really honest. I've certainly have worked with therapists. I've worked with coaches. I have basically two weight loss coaches now. The one paid and the one that's not paid. And we have conversations on a very regular basis about that very, very thing. You've got to learn at some point in this journey to love yourself and to value yourself, and to realize that you deserve to be happy. Right. And that's a difficult lesson for a lot of people to learn. But until you do that and do the work that's necessary to make that happen, then you're back to repeating old habits. So reach out to someone who can help you to work through that conversation in your head, and start changing the conversations in your head. Don't let yourself, you've got to stop saying, I'm a bad person, I'm not worthy. Just by changing the words, you change the neurotransmitter in the head. You change the thought patterns in your head. You can change your behavior.
Yeah. Ruby says, Chef Del has changed my world. His recipes are so delicious. He shares his knowledge and whole food plant-based expertise so generously with all. He always knows what to say, perhaps because he is living it now.
Hi, Ruby. Yeah. Ruby shows up every week. We do a live weekly cooking class, so Ruby's in there every week.
Nice. Bernie wants to know, where are your weekly check-ins? How would somebody join your group? And maybe you could talk a little bit about that, and also about the retreat.
So if you go to, you can go to, there's, I think, a link in the bio that you'll post, but you go to cnskitchens.nutritionstudies.org.
It's in the show notes. Mm-hmm.
And in the show notes, and you'll see us there, and you can join us there. It's free to join. We have in that group the live weekly cooking sessions, which are a paid class, but we have free recipes. We have the free support. We have a wellness challenge. We're getting ready to start another one. Those have become very popular. But yeah, go there and take a look at that, and look around and say hi. There's no cost to join or anything like that, and you'll find a lot of fun resources there. It's really, I'm really impressed with the people in that group more than any other group that I've joined, just because they're so positive and supportive. You can post in there when you're having a bad day, someone's going to talk to you about it. Someone's going to reach out to you and say, hey, been there. What can we do to help you? So I love that kind of support. So that's what we do. And you know me, I love cooking and I love teaching what I know. So the cooking classes are every week. They're live, they're recorded. And if you join, you get access to all the recordings and all the recipes that we've done since we started back in April. I've got 123 recipes we've got posted from all of those classes. So we do those every week and we'll be doing them all year long. But yeah, and then our retreat, if you go to nutritionstudies.org, our wellness retreat is in Tucson, Arizona, or Sedona, Arizona. We're going to have speakers, including Dr. Campbell. Robert Cheek is going to be there. So we're going to have a yoga every morning at 7 a.m. And we're going to have a lot of good conversations, a lot of speakers about the whole concept of wellness. And, you know, Dr. Campbell is all about holism. It's the whole thing that matters, whether we're talking about whole foods or whole health.
Great, thank you. One of the live viewers is asking, does Chef Del ever struggle with overeating healthy stuff? And if so, do you have any suggestions?
It's not as easy to do if you're eating a high fiber diet. But I'll tell you a moment when I did, a couple of months ago, I did teach a no-bake cookie class that was all date sweetened. My friend Chef AJ has helped me learn how to do that. And so I put out 3 or 4 recipes of no-bake cookies, but I live alone pretty much. And I had all these no-bake cookies in the house afterward, and I gave a lot of them away, but I ate more than I would normally eat of that cookie. But here's the thing, you're only going to get so far with that with the fiber. If you're eating a high fiber diet, you can only eat so much before you're going to feel very, very uncomfortable. So it's a little harder to do than it is with something like potato chips, which I can, a pound of potato chips is probably 1,500, 2,000 calories. And I can eat those and still eat more afterwards.
Yeah, it is much, I mean, not to say that there is some natural satiety built into whole natural foods with the water and the fiber.
Yeah. And then, you know, I've gotten some good habits going now that I didn't have before. I'm drinking plenty of water. I don't let myself get dehydrated. Sometimes if I'm feeling hungry, I'll drink water first. Right. And then I'm eating, I keep my house clean. If you come to my house right now, you won't find sugar. You won't find all those high fat foods. You find whole foods. My choices for something sweet right now would be an apple or a banana. If I want something, those are the 2 choices that I have, or dates if I wanted. I don't like dates by themselves, but dates if I wanted something like that. So I would have to go in and make something or go out of the house and buy something. So setting up my environment for having good choices really helps a lot.
At what point did you understand that keeping a clean environment was so important?
Well, our good friend Dr. Popper taught me that years ago. We taught that in classes a lot. And again, I try to cheat the system every chance, and you think you can take a night off and, well, tonight I could just have it, or you say, well, maybe I can have it in the house and then not eat it, and it never ever works. So it's taken me a long time. I'm 61 years old now, but I've learned my lesson. It's just the way that it has to be.
Right. In addition to not having hyperpalatable foods in the house, do you do any kind of batch cooking or just to make sure that healthy food is always available?
Well, here's the fun thing about teaching live cooking classes in your own kitchen every week is that what I cook, I get to eat. So I've set myself up so that I have a good batch of food in the house throughout the week, but I have gotten into batch cooking. We designed a batch cooking course, which didn't do very well, but we're reincorporating it into a wellness program that we're developing to teach people how to batch cook. So batch cooking, and AJ, I'll talk to you about this. I've watched you. I remember in Denver, Colorado, you and I were at the same event, and you walked into the room with a bag of sweet potatoes and sat there and ate that. And part of me was like, oh my God, what is she doing? Right? To me, it just wasn't eating a real meal, but there you were. And then I laughed and I almost called you. I should have called you because I thought of you just recently where I sat down to the table with a couple of sweet potatoes and ate them. Yeah. And that was all I ate.
Oh, they're good. It's a good meal.
Well, right. And it did the job sometimes. And that's been part of it, is getting the mindset around that sometimes you need food to do what it's supposed to do, which is not to give you pleasure, but to fuel your body. Right. And once you can work your mind frame around that, then it becomes easier to make simple food choices. So I batch cook potatoes and sweet potatoes and have those kinds of things in the house. I'll find some kind of a sauce that I want to have around the house. I have a big 3-pound bag of broccoli florets I'm getting ready to go steam so that I have that in the house, big batches of rice or foods like that. So yeah, the batch cooking helps. And the goal is you have to plan. You always have to know what the next meal is going to be. And once you do that, you can stop thinking about food, right? And Dr. Popper says that many times. She goes, I think about food 4 or 5 times a day when it's time to eat. And then the rest of the time it's not, because you've got your meals planned and ready to go. You go into the fridge and you go, oh yes, I'm eating that, and then you're done. But if you're sitting around obsessing about food all day long, you're likely to obsess about unhealthy foods as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm curious, and I don't know if you know the answer to this or can answer it honestly, but we see a lot of people just in general, but also in the plant-based space, that lose tremendous amounts of weight, like you, 200 pounds, and then they gain some or all of it back. And so people are like, oh my God, like why? What happens that like you can't stop it before it's a lot of weight? Do you know what I'm trying to say? Is like, do you weigh yourself often? Because obviously it's probably easier to take off 50 pounds than it is 200 pounds. It's the same process. But like, once you go down that slippery slope, is it that you just can't put the brakes on anymore?
Yeah, well, it does become harder. And I think that for me, a lot of it is not having systems in place to know to put the brakes on. In other words, when I'm not dieting and when I'm not paying attention and I'm just eating what I'm eating, I'm not counting calories or looking at anything like that. And so, and then forgetting how quickly I can gain weight, so I do weigh myself every day. And I was reading, there's a great report. Roberta Russell has a report on permanent weight loss, and she looks at the habits of people who have lost weight and kept it off. And what they do, and one of them is to weigh themselves regularly. And it gives you that gauge. You need some kind of a gauge. The other thing that I do is I also track my food consumption. So I don't calorie count necessarily, but I am recording what I'm eating every day. And there's accountability. There's a self accountability that goes on there that really makes a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's the thing. You have systems in place, and we talked just for a few minutes before we logged on. And one of the things you said is you realize like this is something you have to do forever. Like you can't just go on a diet and lose 200 pounds and then go back to Dell's bread and chips. That you have to be in this conversation every day of your life.
Yeah, and maybe it's going to be a struggle the rest of my life. I don't know, but the point is to minimize the struggle and to maximize your chance of success, right? So you put those systems into place, and then you don't walk away from them. I'm hoping that I've learned that by now. Like I said, I'm not so sure that I'll never binge eat again, but what I'm doing with the system that I have, especially the social system that I have, is having people to check in with and being able to have conversations about it and saying, oh my God, yesterday I did this. So what can happen is, instead of a binge lasting 3 to 6 months, in which case I can gain 75 to 100 pounds, it might last a day, or maybe it'll only last a meal. And the next day I get up and I'm back on track, right? My goal is not to have any more binges. That's the goal. But, I've been in this circle before, and I thought last year after 5 months that I was done with binges, and that apparently wasn't true.
Is it sort of like the I'll start tomorrow syndrome?
Well, it does become the I'll start tomorrow syndrome, or I'm going to do this just this one thing. So now is the time when it has to start, and now is when you have to make the decision to do things differently. And then now is the time when you start having really different conversations with yourself and reaching out to others and saying, here's what I'm doing, help me.
Yeah. I think any kind of addiction generally exists in isolation. I mean, people aren't just like, hey, I just ate, 10,000 calories. Can you help me?
Well, I can remember, and I've told this story a couple of times on stage. I'll never forget when I first started driving. That was when I discovered drive-throughs, fast food drive-throughs. And I can remember going to a drive-through once to a gyro shop, and I ordered 2 gyros and 2 orders of fries. And I laugh about this. I ordered 2 Diet Cokes. And the only reason I ordered 2 Diet Cokes is because I didn't want them to think that all that food was just for me. So I have these secretive plans in place to make me look normal on the outside, while I was engaging in this whole other world inside my head and inside my body. So the less secretive you are, and that's part of what the public accountability thing is, makes such a big difference, because people are watching, and like Sharma said to me, people are watching what you do. Sharma's my work partner. People are watching you every day, and seeing every day, and so you've got to have that accountability out there for that and for them.
Yeah, right. And most people cannot do it by themselves. Some
No, well, some people do, but most people cannot. But if you look at all of the pillars of health that people talk about, that social engagement is a part of it in every aspect of our life. So why would we assume that dieting and eating healthfully is any different? Right? You've got to have that support in addition to everything else. And Dr. Pam Popper says this several times. You guys, you can't pick and choose what parts of the health party that you show up to, right? You can't eat a healthy diet but then not drink water. You can't eat a healthy diet, or you can't drink plenty of water and then not exercise. You've got to deal with the stress, because if your stress causes weight gaining or some sort of hormone reaction I don't understand, and not sleeping can cause weight gain, as we now know. So you have to make all of those things. They need to tick on all the cylinders, or else you're in trouble.
That's right. That's why it's a lifestyle. It's not a diet.
It's a lifestyle, and it's a different lifestyle. But you know what? I tell you something, the things that I remind myself of when I'm thinking about cheating is how good I feel. And I haven't talked too much about this publicly, but a year ago, I was in the hospital a year ago with cellulitis. I had gained 160 some pounds. I was sitting across the room here on this chair after I left the company that I had helped to build. I went home and I sat down, and I sat for 2 years. And I know it was PTSD because I've worked, and I've worked 80 to 100 hours a week for 20 years since I started my business. And when I stopped that, I stopped everything. And I did practice no self-care. The only self-care I did was sitting, which was the worst thing I ever did. Right. So I was ordering food and having it delivered. Anyway, that all led up to me ending up in the hospital with cellulitis, which in part comes from excess weight gain and not exercising and not moving and not doing anything. And coming out of that, it took me a few months before I said to myself, you need to figure this out. And it's taken me a year, AJ, to be able to take a walk around the block, because at 460, 480 pounds, you can't, right? So I've had to slowly build up, and I don't want to lose the progress that I've made. I love being able to walk around the block. I used to walk everywhere. I used to ride a bike. I used to go hiking and camping. I used to do all of these things, and then I stopped doing them because I was not healthy enough to do them. And I want those things. So make yourself a list. Part of the other thing that I do in my world is I have a journal. And in that journal, I've made a list of the things that I want from my life and what I want my life to look like. Right? And it doesn't look unhealthy. It doesn't look sick, and it doesn't look like binge eating. So I'm adopting the strategies that hopefully will. I'm 61. A year ago, I thought maybe I wouldn't live to see 62. Now I'm thinking, well, my dad's 96, and maybe I'll live that long. But if I'm going to be here, I want to live that in a healthy way. I want to have an exciting and a fun life, and enjoy people and enjoy my life.
Yeah. Carol says, and Carol, by the way, congratulations. She's lost an extraordinary amount of weight and have kept it off using whole food plant exclusive diet. She says, I've been journaling my food even when I was actively binging. It's a critical part of my life. And Sherry says, it took me a million years to understand that what you do to take it off is what you have to do to keep it off. That is impossible with conventional dieting, but not with this way of eating. Would you agree, Del?
Oh yeah. Starvation and starvation diets are probably the worst thing ever invented. And it's going against nature. It's going against the nature of your body, right? The hunger signal is a powerful, powerful tool. It is what has helped us survive through millennia. It's why we're still on the planet, right? And so it's a strong one, and it's hard to ignore. So yeah, you've got to eat, and you've got to eat a lot of food, or a lot of the right food.
In addition to the 800-calorie diet that you were put on when you were 8, did you have other attempts at dieting throughout your life? And what were some of them?
Well, I admittedly, I'm shamefully admit that I did try to do the vegan Atkins diet years and years ago, which was a lot of seitan. And all I can say about that is don't do it. It's a blocking up experience and it's no fun. So yeah, I've done that one. I did I mentioned the cabbage soup diet. I did diets where I would eat one meal a day, like around 4 o'clock, and without, if you're not eating the right kind of diet, not knowing what you're supposed to be doing, that's a whole different thing. Um, what else have I done? I've done some weight loss pills back many years ago, and they're horrible. You don't feel good doing this, but that's mostly it.
Do you ever do those weighing and measuring programs that are so popular where you have to like weigh everything on a plate?
No, I'm too lazy for that. It seems ridiculous to me, right? I mean, the plant-based diet is probably a godsend for many of us because you eat from this list, a little bit from this list, and nothing from this list, and that's a win-win situation.
Yeah. Do you think that one of the reasons it's so hard for people to start or restart when they gain the weight back is that there's something in the food that they're eating that affects decision making? Because tomorrow my guest is Dr. Jo Niflin, who literally wrote the book on processed food addiction. And she says it really does impair the decision making part of your brain.
I can see that. I don't know from a scientific standpoint, but if you think about this, think about the world that we live in. Think about the fact that when I get in my car and drive anywhere, the first sign I'm going to look at is the Dairy Queen sign down the street, the McDonald's sign around the corner, the Taco Bell, they're everywhere. Think about when I turn my TV on, that I'm going to be given ads for all of those foods, and then the current weight loss strategies that are not healthy. So, you're bombarded with advertising that is meant to keep you fat, right? It's everywhere. So in addition to whatever's going on physiologically is the social aspect of it all. And you've got to learn how to respond to all of that.
Yeah. You know what? This just happens to be Food Addiction Week, but even if you were on just doing a recipe demo, one of the questions that all the guests seem to get is, what do you eat in a day? Could you take us through that, what it is now and maybe what you do for movement?
Well, let's start with movement. I'm working out with a trainer, and I just hired a second trainer, a trainer that I used to have. I used to work out, and I believe firmly in both weight training. There's three components to exercise, and that's the cardiovascular health, the weight training side of it, and then stretching. And I have to do all three of those to be able to get up in the morning and walk and have any mobility. So the exercise is important. I love working out with my trainer. I have a routine that I follow, but I love having someone who pushes me to the next level. And a day of what I eat, I love foods like oatmeal. I love cooked oats, but if I don't want to heat anything, I live in an unair conditioned house, so in the summer I don't cook. So it might be shredded wheat with homemade. I make my own oat milk and some berries and maybe some chopped dates or something like that. I eat a lot of salads. I make big things of salads, and when I want a salad, I put like chickpeas in my salad so that I have something that's going to fill me up, because the lettuce itself isn't going to be enough. But right now, and I have a garden, we had our own lettuce this spring. We've got tomatoes, and I'm eating cucumbers more than I can ever imagine possible right now because that's what's in the garden. But lots of big salads like that. And then I'm a big stir fry guy. So I love to take rice and vegetables and a simple stir fry sauce and make that happen, because it means I can have dinner in about 10-15 minutes. But I do cook. I'll have baked potatoes. Someone mentioned the cheese sauce earlier. I make this potato-based cheese sauce, and I'll pour that baked potatoes and broccoli and that cheese sauce and have that. And rarely do I make anything much more fancy than that for just me.
Yeah. Do you use all the tools that I love, the Instant Pot, the air fryer? Do you have those?
For years, I denied myself even the what's the blender you love?
The Vitamix.
I denied myself the Vitamix. I've watched you do cooking demos in the Vitamix. I've seen it at PCRM things, and I'm like, blah, 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 right? A big naysayer of the Vitamix. And finally, when I did get one, someone gave me one. and I fell in love with that. And I was like, okay, well, I've got one fancy tool I'm going to have. But a few years ago, I had a Facebook follower just almost upset that I didn't have an Instant Pot. And she bought and sent me two Instant Pots, a large one and a small one. So I've used it. I use it more. And I think I remember you doing the Instant Pot demos years ago, right? And I was like, you don't need that.
I
And
love it.
I teach my classes all the time. You don't need all that stuff. And now I just taught my first air fryer class. And I tell you, the air fryer is probably my favorite because it just means I don't have to turn on the oven. So I love it. Instant Pots by Baked Potatoes and my rice. The air fryers is when I want something like a tofu or something like that. But yeah, I'm in now. I'm on the team.
I'm so glad. It's one of those things. Now I'm promoting a machine because I love it, called the Ninja Creamy. And everybody says, I don't need that. And then when they get it, they go, oh my God, how did I live without it?
I had the same reaction that I've always had. I'm like, I'm not getting a Ninja Creamy. I can do my nice cream in my food processor and I'm good to go. Well, my kitchen's almost out of space. And, I teach in that kitchen and we turn my kitchen into a television studio once a week, right? Cameras and lights and everything. So I'm almost out of space in there. But I saw the Ninja Creamy. It's been all over the place lately. And I'm like, well, we'll see. I'm not letting myself, desserts right now for me. I think even ice cream is too much to mouth feel like real ice cream. And so I'm kind of like, you don't need to do that. Just eat it. And I can't give me a peach and I'm good to go. Give me some watermelon and stuff like that. So I'm riding that wave as long as possible and staying away from the Ninja. Is it called Ninja?
Ninja, the Ninja. And Ninja is a brand. They also make blenders and things like that. But yep. So Sherry wants to know, do any of your friends and family eat this way?
No. My brother, who's coming to live with me next year, we've had many conversations because I've told him that he lived with me 10 years ago and it was a disaster in terms of eating because he had a very stressful job and he'd come home with 2 bottles of wine, chips and snacks, and he'd order meal delivery, not even tell me, and it would show up here and we'd have meal delivery here. And he'll eat vegan if I cook, he'll eat what I cook, but no one else in my family will. But I told him, I said, when you come here next year, we're eating my food. We're not ordering carry out or delivery or chips or wine or any of that. We're going to eat healthy because I'm working too hard to do this, but there's nobody else. Well, I have one distant cousin who joined my Facebook group and who joined me in CNS Kitchen, but I don't really know her that well. But no, not really. My mom she used to get mad because I'd go to visit her and she'd cook salmon. She goes, you can eat salmon. I'm like, no, Mom, no, I don't eat salmon. What am I supposed to cook for you? She'd yell at me and I'd be like, oh. And we had lots of fights about that. So that's the struggle.
Yeah. What do you wish you knew then that you know now?
Well, I certainly wish I knew about the whole food plant-based diet. And I certainly wish I knew that my worth wasn't dependent upon what others thought of me. If I could change those two things, it'd be a different world.
Yeah. Did you ever consider anything like gastric bypass or one of the other weight loss surgeries or weight loss drugs?
No, and I haven't been to a doctor until last year. I hadn't been to a doctor in 35 years. I'm big anti-doctor person. Sorry, doctors. I mean, I know there's good doctors out there, but I've never wanted to. I've had very few surgeries in my life. I've had very few illnesses in my life, but I'd heard the horror stories about, and I have members of the family who've done it, and heard the horror stories about that, and knew I wasn't going to go that route.
Good for you. Susanna wants to know, do you practice any type of intermittent fasting? And if so, what is your schedule?
I have done some intermittent fasting. I don't talk about it too much publicly. I don't, in part because there are people who just, it's not for everybody. I've done a 20-hour fast or 20 hours with 4-hour feeding. I've done 18 and 6, and 18 and 6 is probably more common. I've done some straight 24-hour fasts, but you've got to be ready for that, have the right mindset for that to do that. It's not something you just want to go and do blindly, right? They can lead to what's that called, rebound eating, if you're not careful. So you've got to know what you're doing when you do that.
Yeah. Speaking of mindset, there is a question. Where did it go? It was exactly, yes, from Vicky. I'd like to know about his mindset for what caused him to start this way of eating.
It was almost an accident. I dropped out of college in 1989. I went to work for a vegetarian restaurant because I wanted to get some management experience. That was my entire reason for going there. One of my best friends was a manager there, and they hired me as an assistant manager. 8.5 years later, I was vegan. You hang around the vegans long and the vegetarians long enough, and I was having conversations with people and the owner who told me about animal rights and the animal issues and all of that. And I decided one day I'm just going to do it, and I did it. So the unhealthy vegan came first. But back in 1989, and I tell you, I heard you mention it with Dr. Walsh the other day. I did have a copy of the book Eat More, Weigh Less. It was one of the early cookbooks I actually saw that we tried some of the recipes from back in 1995, I think it was. But it wasn't until I was actually vegan, I was gaining weight. I remember I had been working for the Wellness Forum making product for them 2 years after my bakery opened. And then, but I hadn't adopted the diet. In 2005, I fell and I twisted my foot and broke a bone in my foot, and it didn't heal. And I weighed 485, 90 pounds at the time. And so I was walking around trying to walk on this injured foot and not having any success. And I finally broke down and went to Dr. Popper at Wellness Farm Health and said, I need some help, and took their course on, they had a course called 101. I took that course and started to change the way that I looked at food.
There is a fun question from Ruby. What's the recipe that you created that you are most proud of?
My oven fried tofu. The last dish I ever want to eat on this earth is my oven fried tofu with my oil-free fried corn and mashed potatoes and my cauliflower cashew gravy. It's my favorite meal. We did it in one of our classes as a bowl, but I used to make my oven fried tofu reminds me of my mom's fried chicken. So it's got that garlicky, crusty kind of thing. And I used to make it with, oh my God, so much oil. But once I discovered almond meal, I learned how to make it oil free. And so that it's an edible thing now. And oh, it's so good. I make it in the air fryer. Love it out of the air fryer because it gets nice and crispy. And that's probably my favorite meal, but it's an occasional meal. I try not to eat tofu every day.
Yeah. As much as I want everybody to be vegan because of mainly the animals and my concern for the environment and also human health, it seems to me that at least in your case, if you were able to gain 200 pounds from being a vegan, that for you, it was really more the processed food, the refined carbohydrates that contributed to the weight. Wouldn't you say so?
Yeah, one and yeah, processed foods like even alcohol and potato chips and snack foods and then all the desserts from the bakery and there's being able to go home and whip up a cake in a half an hour is not it's almost a prison sentence. It's a death sentence in a way and I like cake, right? But yeah, the processed foods for sure more than anything. I mean, come on, we can't get fat off of broccoli, can we? No,
Not that I know. Not unless it's deep fried.
So it's the oil, and I tell you what, oil. Give up oil today, and you're going to notice the difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you feel better when you're eating healthier? And I don't mean just in terms because you're lighter and it's easier to move around, but do you notice, do you think more clearly? Do you feel differently?
My work partner calls me. She goes, "You're the guy with the words." I do a lot more writing than I used to, and I do my journaling every day. I write articles for Nutrition Studies website, and my writing has become easy. So she'll call me up when she needs me to a paragraph here or there. The mental clarity that I feel is amazing. I'm not in a brain fog anymore. Sugar and alcohol and all those processed foods are nothing but brain fog foods, and the difference is phenomenal for me. The mental clarity and the energy, just the energy. So one of the things that used to happen when I was binge eating was you eat a 6,000 calorie day, and think about the boa constrictor that eats this really huge meal once every week or so, and then does nothing but digest food. Right. So how much energy is spent digesting all that food? And that's what happens when you binge eat. So not doing that, I've got so much more energy. And by the way, not to mention the fact that I no longer have acid reflux or GERD. So I've stopped supporting Rolaids and Tums, and spent my money elsewhere. But yeah, I have a lot more energy, both physically and mentally.
Yeah, that's terrific. So let me see if there's a question here. I'm going to ask one myself. Here's one from Meadow. Are other chefs around you coming around to healthier vegan cooking with less oil, sugar, and salt?
Somewhat. Columbus is where I live, other than Columbus, Ohio, is a very vegan friendly city, but it is not a whole food plant-based friendly city at all. There's just nothing there. What you do find, and where you have luck, and I'll never forget this. I went to the Toronto Veg Fest many years ago and was a presenter there twice, 2 different years, and walked around the festival in between my events and saw nothing but fried foods, donuts, fried foods, more donuts, nothing but fried foods. And that was the whole theme. And it's what I don't mean to bash the vegan community, but it's an issue where you just can't get healthy vegan foods. But you know where I get it? You're seeing all of these restaurants now where you design your own bowls. So there's a place down the street from me called Buddha Bowl, and you decide what goes into each bowl. So I can get brown rice that's not cooked in oil, and I can get no dressings or sauces and things like that, and make up foods that way. So I love those kinds of places if I want to eat out.
My favorite, we have one called Salad Works, and I love it. I can choose items without oil. I can choose vegan items. It's fantastic. I agree.
I saw you posting about them a few times where you
And it's my favorite way to eat because that's how I like to eat at home I think it's fantastic. I wish more restaurants would do that. Somebody's asking when, why, and how did you become vegan? Is that what you told in the story? I have your book, Better Than Vegan.
Better than 1990. Yeah, I was working at this restaurant with no thoughts of becoming vegetarian or vegan. And I was having conversations with employees who were vegan and customers who were vegan. And I was eating this food, by the way. I was eating this really, really good food that was vegan, not necessarily healthy vegan, but it was kind of just a 1 minute thing. One day, I was volunteering at a food co-op as the volunteer coordinator, and we were looking at opening up a new space, and they asked me if I wanted to do it. And I decided there and then that if I opened up a retail space, I wanted it to be vegan. And that was kind of the turning point for me.
Nice. Peter says, are you a fan of mono meals? I like to cook complex dishes. Probably about 80% of my meals are single ingredients cooked well. Do you like to do that?
I do it for convenience. Sometimes I just don't want to cook, so a plain baked potato is fine with me. But I'm always trying to make sure that I have something that will fill me up. And I know that if I eat a bowl of broccoli, I'm hungry an hour later. Now, what I have done, and I have steamed some broccoli and thrown a can of chickpeas on it and eaten that. So it isn't always about the fancy sauces and stuff like that, but on occasion. But I try to, have something that I like that just happens to be healthy.
Yeah, without the starch, you're not going to have that satiety. So people are wondering where they can get that tofu recipe that is going to be your last meal on Earth.
You're going to have to join the cooking classes. Oh, wait a minute. Did we post it? You might find it on my Chef Del Sroufe Facebook page. It might be there.
All right, so take a look there. Robin wants to know, what do you like to do on your off time?
I have a wonderful group of friends. We have a great park system. And so sometimes I'm outdoors sitting in the park reading. I read a lot. I read not as much pleasure reading as I would like. I'm always doing research. Reading, I watch movies. I'm a science fiction buff. I love hanging out with my friends, taking walks, as I'm now able to do that more frequently. I'm enjoying that. Sitting in my garden, we have a gorgeous, I live in a great neighborhood. I have a gorgeous garden with flowers that we do lots of bird watching and all of that.
Nice. All right. Wait, I saw another question here. Oh, I like this question so much. From Susanna. Are there things you're looking forward to doing when you get the weight off for good?
I've been kayak shopping. My good friend and next door neighbor, by the way, who's 80 years old and far healthier than I am, loves to go kayaking. And I used to like to go canoeing, but I haven't done it for years. And would not try it now while I'm just not as stable as I would like to be, but I'd like to go kayaking. I like to get back to doing long hikes that I used to do. I used to own land in Southern Ohio, and we go down and hike and pitch a tent and spend the night and do things like that. So yeah, there's bike riding. I used to ride 150 miles a week. So I've got bike down there that I've hardly spent any time on that I'd like to get out into the bike trails. We've got wonderful bike trails here in Ohio and go spend a day out in the countryside on a bike.
Very good. I mean, when we've talked in the past, like you were, you got the low fat piece in place, but you were still okay with sugar and salt. And I'm wondering if that's still the case. And the only reason I'm asking is because I find for some of the people that struggle, by taking those out, it makes them less prone to overeat.
I eat some salt. I don't eat it nearly like I used to. Of course, if you not ordering French fries out in restaurants, you don't need as much salt on steamed vegetables as you do on French fries, right? And sugar, I'm learning that sugar is probably my nemesis. In other words, the one piece of chocolate makes me want another piece of chocolate, and the cravings start. So I've been staying away from sugar for that reason. I just don't do well with it. So I think it's about finding what works or doesn't work for you, and that's the one. And I to be honest, I thought AJ years ago, I thought I was going to be an alcoholic because I come from a family of alcoholics. I thought that was going to be the thing that got me. And I was cured of that possibility when I started my own business and was working 100 hours a week. There was no energy for alcohol. So that was never my thing. But sugar definitely is something I really try to stay away from.
Yeah. So there's a question from Vicky. Are your courses online? And then Randy said, I just signed up for the food over medicine course at the Wellness Forum. Do you do anything for those courses?
No, I don't do anything for those anymore. Although I am doing a live dinner there for the first time. I used to do a dinner called Wine and Dine. I'd go and do a 4 or 5 course fancy meal. I'm going to do one of those at the end of September. So that'll be the first live event I've done in person for a number of years. But my live weekly courses are online at the CNS Kitchens website, and those are weekly. It's $24.99 a month, and that's one class a week, and all of the recipes and recordings from all of the other classes, and then our bonus materials. I'm designing these ebooks now. So I just did an ebook cheese sauce cookbook. I'm doing one on salad dressings right now, all oil-free, and we'll be putting out one of those a month for our live weekly cooking class participants.
Nice. Is there a way to help people that are struggling? And what I mean by that is, Dr. Lyle has said to me to just shut my mouth, that if I see somebody gaining weight, they know it and don't say anything. But is there something, if somebody is a friend that's really concerned, is there something that one of us could have said to you? And I'm asking this about you. I'm thinking about somebody else that's near and dear to me. Is there anything that loved ones can do when we see somebody really falling deep into the pleasure trap, gaining weight, isolating, or do we just have to wait when they're ready for help?
There's part of me agrees with Dr. Lyle a little bit about not saying anything, but I do think that there's something to be said for, and I'll give you the example for me about compassionate conversation, about showing someone how much you love and care for them and how much you want them to be happy. I've said this many, many times that no one who's overweight is truly happy. The limitations that are put on you by your body and everything, and the physiology of it denies us happiness. So I believe having a compassionate conversation, but I've tried to talk to those who are just, I have a dear friend who suffers from migraines, and she will not talk to me about getting off of dairy and trying anything differently. Can't have that conversation. So you have to gauge that with each person that you're talking to. But I think if you're willing to have that compassionate conversation, you go a long way.
So what would be appropriate to say? Like, I don't want to say, excuse me, just making this up, Susie, you look like you gained weight, but would I be able to say something like, hey, see, because I just want to know what I can do without offending the person or making them feel worse.
I don't think that you have to, the person who's overweight knows they're overweight, so you don't even have to discuss the weight. I mean, I think to say is like, hey, Susie, I want to talk to you, and I want to have this conversation because I love you. But I think that you might be struggling with your health, and I think that you might want to consider anything that you can do, and any way that I can help you to work through your health issues, because I want you to be happy, and I want to be a part of your life, and I want you to be here for a long time. That conversation worked with my mom and dad decades ago to get them to stop smoking. I said, Mom and Dad, I'm just scared you're not going to be here if you keep smoking. And they both quit. But you have to sort of gauge it person by person, right? Because not everybody wants to hear it. People are so defensive about their food choices, aren't they? Their life choices. It's sort of like the right to eat unhealthfully. It's mine, and I'm my God-given right, or something like that. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah. Well, that's good because I was thinking of a situation where a colleague had lost a considerable amount of weight and gained more of it back, and his mother actually said to me, "Do something," and I'm like, what do you want me to do? Like,
Yeah, my dad says that to me all the time about my brother. He's like, when you go talk to your, and I like, Dad, I do talk to Jeffrey, but Jeffrey has to make this decision for himself that he's ready to lose the weight. But someone talked to me last year, and when I really got serious in September, it's like, Del, you've got this community here that looks up to you. You've got people that look up to you, and I love you and want you to be healthy, and want you to do whatever you have to be healthy. And it meant a lot because he wasn't attacking me. She was coming from a place of love, and it means a lot to know that people care for you that way.
You gave me a great idea, Del, because if this happens again, especially if somebody says do something, what I'm going to do is contact the person and just say something. How would this be like? If you're struggling at all with your health, I would love to help you if you are, something like that, real brief like that.
Yeah, I'm here for you. If there's anything that I can do to help you, please reach out. And
Yeah.
when she's ready, they will.
And that would that offend a person that is maybe on the uptick of gaining weight?
Again, I think that if you come from a place of love and caring, that it's harder to offend. When you're called fat all of your life, you're real sensitive anyway. So it's just kind of it's a careful thing to that you walk that thin line between offending and caring.
Yeah. Or I could just say, hey, how about them Dodgers? That's always a good one, right? So Del, you say, a lot of people are very touched by your story and by your transparency and vulnerability. And I'm just because more people will be watching this after the live. What would you say to somebody that is struggling or was struggling like you in your darkest moments that pretty much has given up hope?
Well, we don't really have the choice to give up. Giving up is a death sentence for most of us, right? And the struggle to be healthy isn't nearly as painful as being sick. And I learned that last year. Chef AJ, last year at my worst, the pain was so bad in my feet that I couldn't crawl up the stairs to go to the bathroom, and I had to have a bedpan. I don't ever want to experience that again. The pain was so bad that I had food delivered to the door and someone go to the door to bring it to me, right? I had to have everything brought to me. And then what quality of life did I have? So it's better to struggle to be healthy, to fight it with every part of your being for the rest of your life or every day, than to give up, because giving up is the end. It just doesn't go well, giving up.
Yeah.
And by the way, I'm not a fan of the medical system. I've stayed away from it, and my goal is to stay away from it. I can spend my time outdoors rather than at the doctor's office. I can spend my time eating healthy food than being sick at my stomach from the food that I eat and unable to sleep because I've got heartburn at night. I think I'll take the healthy route.
Yeah, we have 5 people that are not doctors on this show, and we're doing a combination of some that feel they've reached the other side and some that are on the journey. And my feeling is as long as you don't give up, you can't say whether you're a success or not. The last page of the book hasn't been written.
Right. This is every day for the rest of my life is a conversation that I have with myself about my health and the life that I want to live. Right. So this is my job. This is job number 1, is my health. It determines everything else that I get to do or don't do.
Right. Well, people definitely want you back, and I have an idea of how this could really help more people, because you're a work in progress.
Yeah, I am a work in progress, and I'd love for you to have me back and let you see where I'm at in 6 months or 3 months or a year.
I would love to do that. That's what I'm doing. I don't know if you're familiar with Jonathan Fa, who was over 500 pounds and has
Oh, yeah.
lost 200. And I just say, look, I'm going to book you just so you stay on track, because you're coming on the show in a couple of months. So you've got to stay on track, you know?
Well, when you make it your mission, here's another great motivator in a way. If you make it your mission to help others, by being a success story yourself. You're a success story. And people, I hear every day how people relate to you and how they love to follow you because you've done it, right? But for those of us that struggle, the more of a success story we become, the more people see that you can get beyond the struggling or manage the struggle, right? The struggle is one part of my life. The happiness and the joy and the good things to come are what I'm really living for, not for that struggle.
And you know what? My hope is that if you ever get to a dark place again, that before you gain 200 pounds, you'll watch this video, especially what you just said.
There's no more gaining 200 pounds. There's no more time off for good behavior on the diet. This is every day the rest of the life. So stay tuned for that part of the journey.
Or do what Dr. Goldhammer says, just try it for 50 years. If it doesn't work out, then, you try something else.
Yeah.
Well, one thing I'm so glad that you haven't lost with all the weight you are losing is your sense of humor, your compassion, and you're just a wonderful human being. And, I've always thought very highly of you, and I'm so happy to call you my friend.
I appreciate your friendship, and you've been so supportive over the year. Thank you for all you do. You're a wonderful human being.
And there's nobody I'd rather go up on an Iron Chef against.
Oh,
except thank God we're not doing it with Darshana anymore.
Not with Darshana, you and me, baby. Not no Darshana. It'll be our butts.
Yeah, I mean that. That makes a case for going to culinary school. Look at she
twice we lost her.
Oh my God, that little. No, I love her too. So Del, thank you so much. This has been wonderful.
Thank you. Yay. See you again soon.
My pleasure. And thanks all of you for watching this very special Food Addiction Recovery Week on Chef AJ Live. Please come back tomorrow at 11 a.m. Pacific time when my guest is Dr. Joan Iflin, who literally wrote the book,